Welcome to my show with no name. Today I'm looking at Paul Weller. He was born in 1958 in Surrey, South England. His name was John, but his parents called him Paul. He was in early school in '63 when he became enamored with the Beatles, The Who, and Small Faces. In '72 he saw a Status Quo concert and decided to do that. He formed a band called The Jam, and they played covers and a few originals at working men's clubs. They were not punk, but it was punk's time. The Clash took a liking to The Jam and took them around on their White Riot tour. The Jam punched out a single in the city. It was in the top 40 of the UK for a time. The first to break the top 3 was the Eton Rifles in 1979, and Going Underground in 1980 was number 1. Peter Gabriel brought Welling in to play on his third solo album. 2 more singles charted, Town Called Malice and Precious. There were 2 more songs that did well on the Brit singles chart, That's Entertainment and Just Who Is the 5 O'Clock Hero. These last were not even released as singles in the UK. They charted due to flying off the shelves as imports in Germany and the Netherlands. Beat Surrender went to number 1 as a real Brit single, but Keller wanted to go out on a win, so he squelched the band. You can imagine what that sounds like. For 6 years, Weller gave his attention to a new band called the Style Council, and they charted, and Australia liked the band enough to make Shout at the Top number 1 Aussie. The 80s were generally not kind to 70s bands who didn't adopt the synthesizer approach. The Council began to slip, and you guessed it, it was solo career time. And by '92, his eponymous solo album, he'd established himself as a leading Brit singer-songwriter. The album was more Council than Jam, with its funk and jazz guitar and samples. Ooh, there's that 90s word. Some of the songs were zippy enough to be marketed as acid jazz. Wildwood was a solo effort. Number 2, and its single Sunflower blew our minds. And third of effort, Stanley Road, put Weller back on the top of the Brit chart for the first time in a decade. It was now time for the emergence of what would become known as Britpop, and for the second time Weller was swept into a genre without substantially having the same characteristics. You got Oasis, Pulp, and Blur, and you got Paul Weller without a band. Weller's follow-up to Peacock Suit went to number 5, and the album went to number 2. Best of albums for both the Jam and the Council also did well, and in 2000 he released Heliocentric. In 2001 he released Illumination, which went to number 1. And I think it's safe to say that Britain likes this guy. Studio 150 was the complimentary cover album with songs by Dylan, Gil Scott-Heron, and Gordon Lightfoot. In 2005, Weller's fifth, As Is Now, charted but not high. Critics said it showed the momentum had stalled. What? They wanted grunge? No, Pete. We want Paul to be the mod father. The what? The father of the next generation of mods. So, okay, just dust off the scooter and notify any Teds that aren't in wheelchairs And you better tell Pete Townsend that he's on call. When you call him, speak loudly into the phone, folks. Britpop, Brit Press. It's called Media is the Message. That's never good. So, album, No Jam Reunion album, and it's 2020, so On Sunset was Weller's 15th solo album, and it debuted at number 1. It was pushed back from June to July due to COVID-19, and he is still at it. There will be more Paul Weller, God willing. And I didn't know much about him because I really wasn't a fan of the Jam, or the Clash for that matter. But yeah, did a lot of stuff. Not much of it got overseas to the United States, but doesn't take anything away from his popularity at home.